What's up, peers, and welcome to the World Crypto Network, here live with the new show Open Source Everything. And we're going to continue our nice discussion about the Lightning Network because, it's worth talking about. And today we're honored to be joined by Chris from Surebits. Chris, what's up?
Nothing much. How are you doing today?
Oh, very, very good.
That's awesome.
And so anytime that I talk to someone about the Lightning Network, they always ask for use cases, right? And for testnet, that's like the start blocks to see a point of sale system. Then you can go on Satoshi's place and buy a couple pixels. But then I think the true power of the Bitcoin Lightning Network can truly be shown by um, fully digital and recurring payments. And that is, of course, API calls. And Surebits is working on exactly that, making sure that you can pay per API call with the Lightning Network. And that is absolutely fantastic. But before we get into all this, maybe, Chris, just how did you initially get into Bitcoin and when did you make the pivot to the Lightning Network?
So yeah, I've been working with or on Bitcoin since 2015 in a full-time capacity, and I've heard about Bitcoin first in 2013. I found it through a Forbes article, I think it was at the time, talking about price speculation, because of course that's the most interesting thing about Bitcoin for people that are just getting started. And I kept on peeling back the layers and layers of the onion, and found that this isn't just like a total scam or Ponzi scheme or something, and Bitcoin is something to be taken seriously. And at the time, I was just graduating from college and kind of looking to see like, okay, what do I want to do with my life? What kind of career path do I want to take? And I decided I want to work in Bitcoin in some capacity. So I've been doing Bitcoin stuff ever since 2015. I've done startup accelerators related to Bitcoin. I've implemented a good part of Bitcoin node implementation called Bitcoin S. I've contributed to Bitcoin Core, contributed to Lightning Network implementations. I have not done any altcoin development yet, but I think I want to keep it that way, and I think the Lightning Network is probably going to be somewhat of an altcoin killer. So I'd rather be working on something like the Lightning Network. And we've started working on the Lightning Network pretty heavily here at Surebits in the last 9 months, I'd say, revolving around APIs and monetizing those. There's a interesting history between APIs and like monetization, I think, and that's something we didn't get right when the internet was first created or first kind of burst onto the scene. And we're trying to open up certain sets of data that aren't accessible for traditional people, or like retail customers, I guess is the best way to put it.
Yes, okay, very nice. And good to hear that you have been involved with the Lightning Network for quite some time now, and you've really experienced it growing. What was your experience when you first got into Lightning, when you made your first Lightning transaction, and especially then the path onwards? How did you see this network grow?
Yeah, so like when I was first starting to hear about the Lightning Network was probably 2016, I want to say. I heard about the Poon and Drizha paper talking about this like scalable payment system built on top of Bitcoin. At the time, the political battle, I mean, I guess it was a political battle for about 3 years, but there was a battle about scaling the block size. And, it's kind of one of those low resolution debates about like, oh, we're making this debate about increasing a single parameter when the conversation should be more about moving everything off chain. And at the time, I was very interested in sidechains, a way to move transactions off blockchains to alternative blockchains that are pegged to Bitcoin. So that was kind of looked at the time as an alternative scaling solution. But then another thing came out called the Lightning Network, and I didn't invest a lot of brain power upfront in the Lightning Network, but it's kind of undeniable as you start reading more and more about it, seeing the progress being made. You've got 3 great protocol teams working on the Lightning Network, and I decided to, make a business out of it with Surebits. And I truly believe that the Lightning Network is going to be a way blockchain scale. And I think the Lightning Network will just make it easier for normal people to use cryptocurrency too, because there's a lot of weird things about cryptocurrency that geeks like you and me love and like are willing to put up with, like confirmations and higher fees and things like that. But at the end of the day, most people want that swipe experience for their payment app and not have to think about anything else.
Well, but the question here that I'm always asking, right, with credit card, they are so innovative, right? For years they used it with the pulling through,
Yep.
right, and that was just the way it is. But then they really did some great innovation, and now it's dabbing.
Yes, I know, killer feature.
How can we keep up with that?
I don't know. I think, the user experience of Bitcoin was, it's not the greatest, but like the Lightning Network really does solve a lot of those issues. And, it gives you this global interoperability standard that anybody can hook into at any point in time. Like, this is something people always say in cryptocurrency, but like, there's a bunch of the world that's still unbanked. There's a bunch of the world that's just fundamentally incompatible with payment systems on the other side of the world. You do have behemoths like Visa and MasterCard to, kind of do interoperability. But I think we'd all like to see an open standard that anybody can hook into at any point in time and transact with everybody around the world. So the Lightning Network, I think, meets those goals. Like there's still rough edges to be worked out, but all the Lightning Network protocol engineers just got together in Australia last week to work out some of those kinks. So, and I was just part of Chaincode's Lightning Hacker Residency thing in New York, which was amazing experience, getting in the room with a bunch of talented application devs that really didn't have a whole ton of cryptocurrency experience before. And it was encouraging to see that they didn't have to have 4 years of Bitcoin knowledge like I do to be able to understand this stuff. They could, probably have 3 to 6 months experience or something like that and build compelling solutions on the Lightning Network. And I would encourage everybody to go look at the Chaincode Labs demo day Lightning for the Lightning Week thing, the Lightning residency that they did, and check out what these guys built.
Oh yes, absolutely. Check out all the videos from the Lightning Hack Day, and especially the Chaincode Residency. It has like 30 views, which is on YouTube, which is appalling, because that is the most quality information that I've so far found on the Lightning Network. And I'm really jealous that you were there in person, because that's always much more interesting. So what can you say from that entire experience?
Well, I mean, you learn things that you need to that aren't intuitive to devs when starting out. This was oriented around developers looking to build, Lightning applications or laps. So there was a lot of like setup stuff that I would say wasn't intuitive to people when they were just starting. Specifically, like a lot of people use LND to implement their Lightning applications. There's a thing called a macaroon in LND that people had trouble with, but there isn't a whole lot of documentation around this stuff either. And just kind of conveying that knowledge and sharing it with these devs was a very valuable experience. And like figuring out, I mean, I gave a talk at this Chaincode Hacker Residency, and like one thing we need to figure out with the Lightning Network is how do we make sustainable businesses that revolve around Lightning? And if we don't make compelling businesses for normal people to use, like no one's going to adopt the Lightning Network. And that's part of what I'm trying to accomplish here at Surebits, is to make compelling business models that people can use to, further their commercial interests or even hobby interests around the Lightning Network. And that's kind of how things get adopted organically, in my opinion.
Yes, very much. And the problem really with in general open source development is that it is Libre software, right? It is inherently also gratis software, free software. And that means that these developers that are working on these essential and critical piece of information and code, they sometimes don't get the funding that they really do deserve. And that's something that you hear a lot, that these open source companies or projects or ventures are struggling to finance themselves.
I mean, I think that story's a little bit better in the cryptocurrency space, just because we inherently revolve around like money. But like especially before like Bitcoin came along, like the story with crypto libraries was very, very sad. And like how you have like, I think like on OpenSSL at a certain point in time, there was like maybe one guy working on it full time and then one other guy working on it part time. And that was it for this library that's like just critical to the internet's infrastructure. I think the funding story around Bitcoin Core is again getting better. Ethereum and like all these other altcoin projects too, like they are having more. Again, like there's this give and take with the ICO model. It's like sometimes, like usually they get funded very well, probably overfunded, which I mean, I think is kind of collapsing around us now with all these SEC investigations being opened up. But at least that does give more funding to the infrastructure side of things, even though I think the Bitcoin Core project has probably missed out on a lot of that. And it's still a lot of the active development happening on Bitcoin Core is, what's the word for it? Altruistic, or, I mean, yeah, it's basically altruistic for the most part. I mean, like Blockstream's got Peter Wolla. The chain code guys, of course, are huge contributors. There's a few companies, to be fair, like Bitmain, sponsors an engineer. There's a few other companies that sponsor engineers, but for the most part, for a project that is, worth $100 billion, it has, if Bitcoin was to fail, like every other cryptocurrency project would have huge reputational damage, maybe worse. I mean, maybe the whole crypto project goes away, and yet we still have like, I'm contributor number like 77 on Bitcoin Core, and I've made like 7 commits before. Like that's a pretty sad story.
Yes, and difficult, right? Because we could go the ICO route. We could print money. We could inflate and create either additional Bitcoin or create entirely new shitcoin. But the issue with having such a way of funding, and that is what Austrian economics is, that you have overconsumption. So you spend that money for yachts and blackjack and hookers, and you have malinvestments. You work on Bcash, or you work on CryptoKitties. So I do believe that these altruistic developers, they're not in it for the money. They're in it for liberty. They're in it for Bitcoin.
Yeah.
And that is much more of an incentive to produce a quality service and to not overconsume, but to live prudently and think ahead in the future.
Yeah, I mean, in an ideal world, we would love it that like both of those things are in line, right? Like the people that have the ideological motives are also able to get funded. And like in some cases that is true. In some cases it is not. Like I think Luke-JR isn't, I don't know if he did get funding or not, but for a while there, he, was a very prolific Bitcoin Core contributor and was having a hard time on the financial side of things. And, he's done a ton of stuff for Bitcoin Core. He's, top 10 contributor, figured out how to get SegWit in as a soft fork, always reviewing PRs. And that's, what we need in the world. But like, going back to like kind of this, public utility thing that everybody abuses, like I think the Lightning Network is a great way to kind of align people's incentives more, because you can allow people to do like, little micro tasks basically and get paid for it with the Lightning Network. The API example that we use with Surebits is a perfect example of this. Like instead of having public endpoints that people, waste your bandwidth and like CPU time with, you can now actually require people to pay little amounts of money from anywhere in the world, rather than, either having a large upfront subscription cost like most API providers do, or just, giving away the product for free. We're looking to kind of be in that middle ground there.
Yes, and of course, I do appreciate projects like Patreon or Tallycoin, where you can do fundraising with Bitcoin. But you see that Luke Dash Jr. has 74 patrons. And,
does he?
Yeah, which is great, right? 74 people contributing. But then on the other hand, how many people are using segregated witness? And are they aware that Luke Dash has fought this war for us? And here's a huge reason and why we have won and have segregated witness. And it's tough, because again, it is Libre software. You can use it without paying anyone or without contributing. But I do believe that when you use FLOSS software, open source software, then you have a responsibility to contribute. either by spreading the word or being an active user and giving feedback or writing code or paying for those that do write code.
Yeah. And that's how we make sure this stuff, doesn't fall tragedy to the commons and keeps growing in a sustainable way, because you can only rely on people's goodwill for so long before, they need to get their own bills paid, which is understandable. We just hope that, with that day doesn't come too fast and we're able to figure out, long-term sustainable business models for these people that are a little bit more of independent and want to remain independent with something like Bitcoin, rightfully so, because, it is dealing with money.
Oh, yes, absolutely. And do you think that, although Bitcoin is a really useful, sound money already, but do you think that with the Lightning Network specifically, that these funding strategies or payment strategies are somehow more easily approachable? Do you think that we can, with the Lightning Network, kind of solve this, what do you call them, the poor, the starving artists?
Yeah, I mean, so maybe to a certain degree, like with the dev stuff, it's a little bit different because, so like how we look at this stuff at Surebits is to effectively have some sort of work or information that's valuable. It needs to live completely in the digital world, and there needs to be a binary outcome of, I guess it just needs to be like totally digitally native. So like in the case of what we're doing at Surebits, we're dealing completely with digital data. We can, serve people with that data very easily. It's very easy to verify if they receive that data. It's very easy to tell if someone paid us for that data. So it's easy to make sure that no one's cheating and everybody's playing by the rules and everybody's happy. They pay us, we send the data back. We do that like 1,000 times, and then they stop paying when they want to stop receiving data. Now, in terms of like developer effort, that's a little bit more tricky because there's more nuance to it. For instance, Luke-JR's Bitcoin Core PR that allowed segregated witness to be a soft fork is much more valuable to Bitcoin Core than my commit that like cleaned up some test cases. Like, his is like probably thousands of orders of magnitude more valuable. So how do you quantify that in this digital world with Lightning Network payments? It's not a trivial thing. One thing you could do that's interesting is, pay people every time they have, Bitcoin Core PR merged. But again, it's not exactly, my Bitcoin Core PR being merged is not equivalent to Peter Woola's Bitcoin Core PR being merged, because Peter is a much better programmer than me, works on much bigger projects, and deserves more money, rightfully so. I think we can start having those conversations about how we classify things, but there still has to be a little bit of human intervention in there to set the prices according, or someone needs to vote on what prices should be for like Bitcoin Core PR merges. But with Lightning Network, if we were to be able to figure out those prices, then every time, that a GitHub PR is merged, we could automatically be sending a Lightning Network payment to that person's Lightning node, and he would be able to receive payment for his work done, which would be awesome. And that creates a really positive feedback loop for Bitcoin as a whole, and hopefully would encourage more contributors to make big time contributions.
Yeah, okay, interesting. I never thought of automatically paying out for the GitHub contributes, but kind of makes sense, though difficult for the incentive structure to get that right. And as you said, there are different qualities. It's not just quantity of code, and tricky. So
yeah, it's tricky. I think it's a fun thought experiment, at least, because again, going back to what we're doing is GitHub is just an API, and you can, I think Lightning Network and APIs work really well together. Now, again, the question of how much or how little should be paid and doing that in a decentralized open manner, that's the tricky part. Because there isn't really a commercial interest behind Bitcoin Core. There isn't the CEO of Bitcoin Core that just sets the pay scale for Peter or Luke-JR or myself or even so.
No, you misunderstand, Chris. I am the CEO of Bitcoin.
Congratulations, Mr. Nakamoto. It's very nice to meet you.
Well, Ben, I do think that Surebits is quite a good, quite a good approach of funding development, right? You have a real business, right, that is providing a service or goods in general for other people, and these other individuals are voluntarily paying to receive these goods and services. And then the company somehow, right, dedicates a couple developers or individuals in general to work on the underlying infrastructure that makes this business model possible. So what is your approach here for Surebits?
Well, so like, I mean, what I was giving there as an example is kind of a more theoretical way we could use Lightning Network and APIs together, and that's like more of in a open source, like decentralized governance system. Not, I don't even know if you want to call it a governance system, just a code contribution system. What we do at Surebits now is like we just take data streams, data feeds that are traditionally very hard to get access to, and allow people to get access to these things with micropayments over the Lightning Network. So the APIs that we have available right now are American sports-related APIs. The National Basketball Association, which is what LeBron James plays in, and the National Football League, both have their seasons going on right now, and you can query our API for real-time statistics about what's going on in the game while they're happening. Traditionally, this data is very hard to get access to, and it costs you $3 or $4 grand upfront per month to get access to this stuff. And as a developer that just wants to tinker and figure out if he can build something cool, that's almost an insurmountable barrier to entry there. But now that we have this cool technology called the Lightning Network, anyone from anywhere can like request this data and pay for it in very small increments. So that's like kind of what we want to keep doing, is opening up data feeds that is very hard for people to get access to. Another like things that we're interested in is traditional financial market data feeds, like the Chicago Board and Exchange has a Bitcoin futures contract product on trading on like this on SIBO. And for us cryptocurrency people, it's really hard to get access about what's happening in that market. The exchange charges exorbitant data feeds or data fees for access to this stuff. So, something that could potentially have big implications on the cryptocurrency market is nearly impossible for all these people across the globe to get access to because it lives behind this walled garden. And what we'd like to do with Surebits is allow people to still pay for it. I'm not saying that it's going to be free, for instance, but I mean, like, you at least have to be able to get your foot in the door without going through, regulatory headaches, the battles you have to fight to just even get access to these data feeds. And we want to open it up for everybody to be able to access this data simply by just running a Lightning Network node and querying our API for information relating to this stuff.
Okay, very interesting. And then the question that I raise is, when you say you pay for these API calls, is it that you first, I'll just toss the ball over to you. How exactly is this process of paying and the creation of the invoice handled specifically for these API calls?
Yeah, so I mean, like, actually, I could screen share with you and take you through a demo if you don't mind.
Oh, absolutely. We here at the WCN always love to really get into the tech and see how it actually works.
Okay.
And try it out. Okay,
cool. I am sharing my screen. Hopefully you can see yourself at the moment.
Such a pretty picture.
Okay, so we're going to look at, we're going to do a demo of what our exchange WebSocket looks like right now for Surebits. So we have an API coming out that we're working on in kind of a closed beta right now called the Surebits Exchange API. What this allows you to do right now is just connect to an exchange's WebSocket and stream information about trades going on, or in this case, order books that are happening on Bitfinex right now. So this is like a really great way for us to test out our software and see what it would look like for a more traditional exchange to use something like this. But so what steps I'm going to take you through here are connecting to the Surebits WebSocket, sending a request for information from Bitfinex. We're going to get a Lightning invoice returned that the user will need to pay to get access to this data. And then we're going to see a stream of data come at us that's just information about what's happening on the Bitfinex exchange. Does that sound good? Does that make sense? Do you have any questions?
Okay, so is it that you first generate the invoice and you package this in kind of a initial message where you introduce the API and what it does, and then on a second step or later, which we're going to see in just a second, then the user pays this invoice. Is that right?
Yes. This is yep. You got an idea of how this is going to work. So I am going to click the open button here, and that's going to connect to the Surebits WebSocket for exchanges. And we're going to open the WebSocket, and we get this message back from the WebSocket that says, "Welcome to Surebits Exchange API. Here is the Lightning Network node you need to connect to make a payment to this API." So you see it's like this public key at ln.test.surebits.com. There's some other information over here about like things you can query. But I've already done the Lightning Network connection part of this behind the scenes, like before we get on air. So I'm going to skip through this step. The next thing we need to generate is a refund invoice. So what this refund invoice means is if you stop streaming data before this duration here is fully up, you get a refund from our API for the data you did not consume. So say, for instance, again, with these traditional APIs, they make you buy a month of data, whether you want an entire month or whether you want an entire hour or whether you want an entire minute. This is very inefficient, obviously, because for different applications, you only want specific streams of data. So in our Exchange API, we have this duration field that allows you to specify in milliseconds how much data you want. So I'm going to say for the example here, we want 15 seconds of data. And now, if I do not consume the entire 15 seconds of data, I need to provide a refund invoice that gets paid back to me if I stop the stream early. So I'm going to go generate a refund invoice.
And for this refund invoice, I thought that an invoice inherently has a specific sum encoded that is being transferred. But we do not know yet how long we're going to call this API, so we do not know exactly how much money we will receive back in this refund address.
So you're absolutely right that you can optionally encode the sum in the invoice. It's not required. So in this case, I'm going to generate an invoice from my terminal here. I'm using a Claire. Can you see this? I just want to double check.
Oh, yes.
Okay, great. I'm going to generate an invoice on my Claire node to receive an invoice refund from. And I'm going to give it a description of open source everything, because that is the awesome podcast. And we're gonna see an invoice here that's generated. The important thing here is there is actually no amount added. In like getting really low into the technical weeds, if there was an amount, it would be right after this B. But since we did not specify one on the command line, the Surebits Lightning Network node will compute what your appropriate refund should be and then send it back to this invoice after you're done streaming data. With me so far? There's a lot of stuff going on.
Yes, and what I'm really especially curious is that now you're paying upfront for a precise period of time, right?
Yes.
Could you contrarily not pay for a period of time, but actually for the packages that are being received? So the individual pieces of information that are being sent, each one of them is being paid a Satoshi.
So I'm not exactly sure if I understand. So are you saying the server initiates sending the client a message and then the client makes a payment if it receives the message?
Well, yes. So or similar. So basically, let's say a new basket is being scored in basketball, right?
Okay.
And 2 points are being added to the scoreboard. If the user wants to have this information, the single API call, right? Then he pays the Lightning invoice, and only then does he receive this one piece of information.
Yep, that is exactly how our pay-per-call APIs work. So the demo I'm going to take you through here is a WebSocket example where you'll see after we do this stuff, we get stream data back and forth. But there is another version of APIs called pay-per-call APIs that works exactly as you were saying. So I'm gonna click the send button here. So we send this request to the Surebits API server, and we get a reply back. The reply is the Lightning Network invoice that the Surebits API generated that you need to pay to be able to stream data. So I'm going to copy this invoice, and I'm going to go over to my Claire node on the terminal here, and I'm going to type node1 send, then paste that Lightning Network invoice there. So what this is going to do is I'm going to pay the Surebits Lightning Network node this amount that's encoded in the invoice here, which you very astutely noted before. In this case, it's 150N, which I believe means nano Bitcoins. Anyway, it's going to pay this amount in the invoice, and I'm going to click enter and then go back to our other screen very quickly, and we should see data streaming. So enter, we get the Lightning Network payment, and then we come back here, and as soon as we look back here, we see all this information streaming in. So what we just did here is subscribe to 15 seconds of the Bitfinex order book, and we should get a stop message here pretty soon that the streaming is ended. Does that make sense?
I mean, Peter, what the fuck is going on here? This seems like magic internet money. Oh, is it?
This would definitely be magic internet money, and like what I always joke with people. You know, I don't know when you got into Bitcoin, but like back when I got into Bitcoin, it was always sold, you know, Roger Ver was always saying this is like fast, cheap, you know, electronic transactions across the globe. And like, I think this experience that the Lightning Network gives you is very much fast, cheap, you know, electronic transactions across the globe, even where you can use this stuff on, you know, a second basis. Like, again, we just subscribed for 15 seconds of data there. And if I didn't do so much explaining and we did this in a pragmatic way, that would have taken, you know, a very short amount of time to do this entire process.
It's scan, press pay.
Yes. Yep. And like, I mean, the target market we're going after is developers that want to get access to this data. You know, like, financial markets data is obviously really valuable. You can do all sorts of interesting trading stuff based on it. And, you know, I don't think any non-developers will be using our APIs, but like, part of what I want to do too is just show people interesting things you can do with the Lightning Network and how it isn't vaporware and can be used for a serious commercial use case.
Wow, that is really, it is quite insane, especially to think that it's here. Like it's actually happening.
Yeah, this definitely isn't vaporware. I promise you, you could go look up the Lightning Network URI that I had at the beginning of this channel to make sure it's, you know, a Lightning Network node that's running right now, and you can query this these endpoints at surebits.com/API if you guys want more information on different endpoints that we have available, and we're looking to add more because, you know, this is a very new innovative way to monetize different data feeds, and we're looking at, you know, opening up more of these data feeds to everybody.
Okay, yes. And what is so really interesting is that for this, you needed to have a dedicated payment channel directly to Surebits. Is that correct?
You don't need that, but I did have that. So you, of course, can use the Lightning Network routing functionality to make these payments. So you could connect to somebody that's connected to us and route payments to our API endpoint. But in the case of the example I just showed you, my node is directly connected to the Surebits API node.
But the beautiful thing is that when you are directly connected to this node, the transactions are zero fees, 0.00, nothing. Right? You have the on-chain opening fees and the closing fees, but in between, it's literally zero.
Well, no, that's not necessarily true. I mean, like, nodes can charge routing fees. So, like, say if you're a node that's a very reliable node and you have a lot of liquidity, you can charge fees in the Lightning Network protocol for routing through you. And like, there's a lot of arguments going on in the Lightning developer community right now. I wouldn't say arguments, that might be a strong word, but like thoughts about this in the Lightning Network developer community, talking about like, how is the best way to make sure we develop a robust network going forward? And is like routing fees a good way of doing that? Is that not enough? Is it too much? Like, there's a lot of conversation around this stuff, and I wouldn't say any of us know the answer yet. I mean, I want to read the Lightning Network developer the protocol spec meeting that they just had and see kind of, you know, what the heavy hitters are thinking in terms of that. But Alex Bosworth has wrote a lot about this stuff, and he is a very ardent supporter of Lightning Network routing fees, because he believes it weeds out bad connections to his node and make sure people aren't abusing his liquidity. Because there is like, if you don't charge some fees, like you end up in situations where people just want to always like close your channels and like waste your money with on-chain fees because I don't know, they want to DOS you or something along those lines. So you always get these like weird adversarial situations in an open network, and you always have to spend some time thinking those through.
And especially because this is a network of money. And then there's actually something at stake. There are people with skin in the game. And if you mess up, well, money gone.
Yeah, I mean, and like, you know, we think about that a lot at Surebits. Like, you know, the refund part, I didn't demo for you there. But, you know, it does exist, and we're planning on doing refunds. But again, we're sending outbound payments to people, which is just like having a hot wallet as an exchange. So there needs to be a lot of security consideration that goes along with this stuff. You know, Lightning Network nodes are essentially hot wallets. So, you know, for all your users out there, I just want to make sure that they understand that, and, you know, don't put your life savings in a Lightning Network node. You know, put like, I think a good rule of thumb is like what you feel comfortable carrying around in your wallet, like, you know, your physical wallet. Like, don't carry more, or don't put more than that on your Lightning Network node.
Yes, exactly. And especially when you are routing payments, then you're broadcasting your IP address, right? So you are telling the entire network, here's where I am, this is my channel capacity. Yep. Come and take it.
You are 100% right there. It's a big bounty on your head, especially, you know, the larger and larger your channel capacity gets.
Yeah, so this really is interesting, and I'm curious to see where the security model will evolve, because of course we're not yet done. Right? Lightning is just getting started, and we didn't have hierarchical deterministic wallets in the early days of Bitcoin. We didn't have hardware wallets back then, and now we have all this stuff. So storing your Bitcoin on chain securely, rather easy, right? Still doable. Where do you see the security aspect evolving and for the Lightning Network?
Yeah, that's a really great question. You know, there's the traditional things people think about with Lightning Network that like apply to hot wallets too. So that's like, you know, storing your private keys securely. But then the Lightning Network also has different security characteristics around monitoring the blockchain, basically. I'm just going to talk about the former. I think what needs to really be adopted in Lightning is HSMs, or hardware security modules. Those are hardware devices that sign things and are, I mean, you can't hack them. I say that quote unquote, hack them from the internet, or even like if you have them in person. So that gives you like a certain degree more of security around like your key handling stuff. And I think if you're going to be doing a ton of Lightning Network payments and a high degree of liquidity on your node, you should definitely consider that as a step to secure things. Like I talked, you know, quite a bit with Christian Decker from Blockstream. He was at the Chain Code Lightning residency thing about C Lightning's architecture, actually, and it's a pretty compelling architecture for allowing you to plug in different security policies and different key management systems, like a hardware security module or HSM, to get a little bit better security on your Lightning Network node, because that is, you know, terrifying at the moment. And like, again, it took us a long time to figure out what Bitcoin security best practices were. Like now, I mean, I wouldn't even say that's completely figured out. I mean, like, there is a lot less exchange hacks now. You know, cold wallets are the safest thing, obviously, but, you know, with Lightning, you can't really have this cold wallet, or at least not in the current incarnation we have. So we at Surebits have definitely been spending some brain power thinking about that, and like we want to talk to exchanges about like how we can get them to have some sort of safety in their infrastructure, since they have a huge target on their back too.
Yes, and we see still today with hardware wallets, for example, the Ledger, which has found a little bug that makes, for any website, it's possible to extract your extended public key without asking you for permission if the Ledger is connected and unlocked.
Yeah, that's terrifying.
And right, although no funds can be stolen because it's just the public key, so your Bitcoin are still safe, but your privacy is completely broken.
Yes. And like, I believe, is it with Ledger, or no, with BIP32, I think there's a little known like algebraic vulnerability that says, don't quote me on this, but like it's something along the lines of like, if your extended public key is exposed, and then I think one of the child private keys is exposed, you can like derive the entire private key hierarchy, which is like terrifying.
Oh yes, I was talking to this to Cato Miner, and I wasn't entirely sure if I was accurate or if this was a older scheme. But yes, if you have the parent, the master, the root,
Yes.
Public key, and some child private key, that you, for example, gave, I don't know, to some of your employees,
Yes.
so that they can spend this small amount in the entire wallet, but not everything. But now, if this employee is malicious, right, they already have the private key for this. If they now can get your master public key, that is the master private key, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. And like, so that just goes to show, we've got a long ways to go with the Bitcoin security picture, and like, keeping like funds online is very hard to do. Like, there's exchanges that do it, and they do it pretty well, but they have large teams of security engineers and developers like securing these things. And like, I don't think everybody wants to have a team of 15 people like constantly just watching the entire IT infrastructure. So like there's the like kind of schemes I've been thinking about with the Lightning Network. I think like most people will end up having some sort of like public facing node, and then like an intranet where you have private internal nodes on the Lightning Network for your company. But still an unsolved problem, definitely.
Oh yes, and let me just close a little bit something of a project that especially Cato Miner has been working on, and that is the Nodl, NODL.IT. Link is in the chat. And this basically is a ARM 64 board, just a little computer. It's not a Raspberry Pi. It has much more power than that. And with this, we are going to run a Bitcoin full node, a Lightning node, BTC Pay server, right? So that is already done, and you have a dedicated hardware for all this. It's not yet a hardware wallet, right? Of course, but at least it's dedicated hardware. And stay tuned, because we have a bunch of really interesting stuff coming very soon.
Yeah. I mean, what is the guy's name again? I heard you say. Can you put it in the chat? The guy's name that's like developing this. I'm kind of curious now, and it's called Nodl.
Yes, exactly. It's a play on HODL, right? It's the node.
Okay. Oh, okay, I gotcha.
I'm still not sure how to pronounce it, actually. Is it Nodl, like HODL, or is it Nodl, like the node?
I don't know. Like, there's still like it's always funny on those like mainstream finance channels. Like you hear them like picking up in the US, it's CNBC, and you hear them picking up on like the Bitcoin memes, and you're like, it's like that old person that like hears what all the young people are saying, and they start saying like HODL, and then I'm like, oh no, like, and like for a while there was like, hold on for dear life is what they started trying to like reappropriate the name to be, and I was like, I don't know if that's like what it actually is, but yeah, that's cool. I have to check that out though, because that is interesting, because like you said, like getting to at least dedicated hardware like makes you feel a little bit better about this stuff. Like I don't know if you keep up with a bunch of computer security stuff, but I saw this morning they're still finding attacks for the Spectre and Meltdown, like Intel, I think it was Intel CPU vulnerabilities. So like anything that runs on like cloud computing is on shared servers, is that's not great for that stuff, because you can like kind of look to see what's in other people's like CPU like space, I guess. Damn.
Oh yeah, right. And again, do you really control your hardware? And do you really know what's going on in there?
Yeah.
And of course, right, open source everything. That goes, of course, for the software. You need to know what the software is actually doing. But do you think that we can also have more of a open and transparent approach to hardware as well?
Well, this is like it's one of those things that I think runs into. Okay, in what sense do you mean that? Do you mean in like the design and development stuff, or do you mean in like the deployment and like having a huge server warehouse somewhere?
Well, I'm a big fan of the Purism laptop, which is why I'm currently running on this shitty laptop where I cannot share my screen, otherwise I would show you. But the Purism laptop, it's not 100% open source hardware, but at least you know the blueprints, so to say, and the design of the chips as much as possible. And it's at least you can be somewhat transparent in what type of hardware you're running and how it is set up.
Yeah, I mean, like I think that like stuff is much more of a possibility than like, no, say if you're Google. Well, I mean, I guess Google's big enough where they can have their own like cloud computing center. But like, say if you're like a middling company, say you have 1,000 employees or something. Like, I don't think you're big enough there to like pour your own concrete and like build your own cloud computing center. So like, you end up in this like in the latter case of open sourcing, and like having accountability of like where all your machines are running and stuff. That's very hard. But I would like to see a movement towards like open sourcing more hardware design and I guess understanding what's going into these CPUs. Like, it's very complex what's happening in there, and now we have a bunch of CPUs that are deployed that are vulnerable to all these vulnerabilities. And unless you want to lose 30% performance, like is the last thing I saw from like this I forget, it's like branch predict instruction or whatever they have, like you're gonna have a vulnerable CPU.
Yeah, and then the question is, are you going to buy a old piece of hardware that was before all these things? And there's a company doing exactly that, completely old hardware, and they kind of fix it up and sell it again before all these hardware hacks were introduced. But then you're gonna run 20-year-old hardware. I mean, that's gonna be a choice.
Yeah. So like this is, I think the interesting space we're in right now, and I don't have the latest hardware statistics in front of me, but it's, we're not getting as many advances in hardware as we used to be, it seems like. And I don't know if we're like actually starting to run up against like the theoretical limit of what CPUs can do or not, but like maybe we finally are coming to the era of like, we're not going to get these like exponential improvements in compute anymore. And that's going to be an interesting conversation to have in the wider, I guess, technology industry, because things aren't going to be getting as fast unless you want to have like a huge bulky like machine or something.
Right, and historically on these laptops, pretty much all that was transferred was information, right? Goods that you can copy as much as you want. And although, right, it kind of sucks for privacy reasons and among others, if other people have your information, but at least they're not stealing from you because it's information, right? You can copy it. But now we have Bitcoin. And now we have a digital piece of information, the private key. And once you lose access to this, or once someone else gains access to this, you lose the control and ownership of some very scarce Bitcoin in a way that you can never get them back. And I do believe that this will increase the incentive structure of making sure that the hardware that we are running is actually secure and actually usable.
I have a very similar opinion to you. I've been saying for a couple of years now that I think Bitcoin might be one of the catalysts for people starting to take computer security seriously. Because like people, when they lose their like own personal data, they're mad for maybe like 6 hours or something, and they get over it and forget about it, and then promptly enter in their username and password and date of birth, social security number into another site. But now, like when we have we have a digital bearer asset, that's the true difference with Bitcoin. that can be at stake here, people will, I think, start to take this stuff more seriously, which I think is great because, you know, computer security, like the more and more like you read about Bitcoin and read about like computer security, like the more and more fear you should have instilled in your heart and realize how hard it is to, you know, secure digital artifacts. You know, we're really good at physical security. Humans have been doing physical security for like tens of thousands of years, but digital security, we've only been doing that for, you know, 30 or 40 years.
Oh, yeah, and we see that even with tools like the ledger, right, that are rather secure, still not perfect. And,
Yeah.
and even if you have something like the cold card wallet here, which is amazing, right, open source hardware and software as well, but still, it's not going to be perfect, and there are attack vectors, and it can be compromised, and it's tough. It really is not easy.
Like, I mean, that's one of the, I don't know enough about this to really speak intelligently, but like the designs of like Trezor and Ledger, and I don't even know what the other hardware wallets that are available now versus like, what are they called? Like traditional hardware security modules or HSMs, or like these, I forget, micro cards or whatever they're called. I think Ledger uses those actually. But like, I just don't understand like why the Trezor and Ledger people decided to go a different route to hardware wallets than like what is more traditionally available on HSM. And maybe it's just because HSMs are much more expensive, and the design they have for HSMs is like inherently expensive and only really available to people with a lot of resources. But like, I'd be interested in seeing someone write a very detailed like blog post about like the different architectures of all these things, and like show why HSMs are better, or Trezor's better, or Ledger's better, you know, whatever the outcome is. But I'd love for somebody to do a detailed report on this stuff.
Oh yeah, we need much more of that, and we still need it for Bitcoin, and we very much still need it in the future for Lightning as well.
Yeah,
so curious where this goes.
Yeah, like, you know, so I am a maintainer for an open source library, and like we've thought for like a couple of Bitcoin developments coming down the pipeline. There's Neutrino, which is a light client alternative to SPV that I'm very excited about, because like for users of our API, you know, one of the biggest barriers to entry is syncing an entire Bitcoin D instance, which is definitely an exercise in patience. It takes, you know, roughly 24 hours for node to sync, depending on what hardware you're on, of course. But like with Neutrino, that can be cut down to 10 or 15 minutes, assuming you're starting with a wallet from scratch. And like for our user experience here at Surebits, like that is a much more palpable user experience rather than having to sync an entire Bitcoin D instance. So we're looking to get Neutrino stuff into Bitcoin S, and then figuring out how to like safely integrate hardware wallets into Lightning. Because like, again, if we expect, like, say, traders to be using our platform, we want to make sure that they can do so in a secure fashion by, you know, hooking in their Ledger, Trezor, or whatever piece of hardware they got, and you know, be able to plug and play and, you know, use their funds in a more secure manner. Another interesting thing that got merged into Bitcoin Core recently was this stuff called partially serialized Bitcoin transactions, which is supposed to be a common standard for hardware wallets to implement to allow you to have more interoperability across the space. And, you know, with our Bitcoin library called Bitcoin S, we want to, you know, serve all those purposes and use cases and allow for people to have more security using our APIs.
Oh yes, absolutely. And these PSBTs are integrated here in the hardware wallet.
Really? Very nice.
That's all that they use. And it goes that far that you have a SD card slot, right here.
Okay.
And you could theoretically put together the transaction on your malinvested or in your completely infected hardware, and you put that on a secure SD card. Then you plug the SD card here in the cold card. You plug the cold card into a power bank, so it's not even connected to the internet, right? Never. Then you sign it, put the SD card out, put the SD card with the signed transaction into the malinfested computer. Still rather secure. Not perfect, right? Because you are actually putting the SD card in here, but really, really good.
Yeah.
And then, as you also brought up, the Neutrino client, and another really cool project is the Wasabi wallet, a privacy-focused wallet, which is running the Neutrino client right now.
Oh,
and it
really?
works perfectly. So really cool. Plus a lot of additional features like Xiaomi and CoinJoin. So if you want to get your privacy back, use the Wasabi wallet. It's cool.
Yeah, I have not tried that. So is the Wasabi wallet, is that just available on desktop or is that available on mobile? Do you know?
Well, it is unfortunately right now only available on desktop.
Okay.
Main reason is because of the Neutrino client. Because
Yeah.
these Golem Rise filters, right, these inverted bloom filters, they are rather resource intensive. And if you would have that on your phone, then it would drain a lot of the battery and it would consume a lot of the bandwidth. It is possible to have it on your phone. It's not yet efficient.
Yeah, like, well, so like I'm guessing they're paired to BTCD too, which I mean, BTCD is not nearly as efficient as Bitcoin Core. Another thing, like I was actually talking to Thomas, I think it's Bogatellin. I don't know how you say his last name, the lead dev of Electrum. And he was talking to me about like, what he likes about Neutrino and what he doesn't like. And he said an inherent limitation to Neutrino is the bandwidth requirements. Because basically, if you have a match in your GCS or Golem coded set, you have to download the full block, which is a megabyte of data roughly. And there's no getting around that. Whereas SPV, you just get these like bloom filters, of course. Which I mean, still for like desktop applications, it's still a huge win. You don't, destroy your privacy, and you also don't have to run a full Bitcoin D node if you don't want to. So yeah, that's the problem though with Neutrino on mobile clients is like if you have a huge wallet and you're constantly matching on the filter, you're going to have to basically download a full block every single time.
Exactly, right. And but still early tech. Let's see where this takes us. Another really early tech, and I was really surprised when I saw this on your website. So you have the Bitcoin S, right? That's a Scala implementation of the Bitcoin protocol. You will have, of course, the sports data. That's monetization of NFL and NBA data through your APIs paid with Lightning. But then you also have sidechains. So you're building your own sidechains with your guide, and that can be found on GitHub right here.
Yeah, I should caveat the sidechain stuff with I haven't worked on that for quite some time now. Like I said, like back when I was learning about Lightning Network, a popular alternative to Lightning or a competing technology, I guess I would say, to Lightning was sidechains. And I was very excited about how with especially in the ICO craze that ended up happening, like with sidechains, you can still have the same asset on a different blockchain. And like that's so compelling to me because then you can have all of this innovation allowed at the lowest level in the protocol, the blockchain, and still have the same network effect that money has on the same blockchain instead of like spinning up a new currency for everything you want to try. And unfortunately, like sidechains, I believe, have some fundamental limitations to them. Like I wrote a blog post about this, I think probably a little over a year ago, and talking about these fundamental limitations. And like, unless there's some really cool technology that's invented, I'm a little less bullish than I used to be on truly peer-to-peer sidechains. And those are the ones I was working on, not like Liquid, which is like, a federation. Like that's a little bit more of a trusted setup, but like the sidechains that were kind of imagined when the first sidechains white paper was published. If anyone, but I still do love to talk about sidechain stuff. And if anybody has any interesting ideas, I am definitely open to hear them because I think a lot of this, nonsense that's going on in cryptocurrency right now would be hopefully tabled if we had proper working sidechains today.
Oh yes, and I do realize that there might be possibilities of having a truly peer-to-peer, more decentralized sidechain, which would be cool because the current federation model is centralized and to an extent trusted. Right? You put on-chain, parent-chain Bitcoin into a 11 out of 15 multi-signature, and if 11 of these 15 federation members collude, your Bitcoin are gone.
Exactly. I mean, I kind of wonder, like, just the legal question too, like, how many different jurisdictions are these people in? Like, say if they're all in the United States or if they're all in like China or whatever. Like, those are the questions you start asking too, because then it's like, can they be subpoenaed to like, take the money, and who knows?
And I actually yesterday I had a little talk at the Frankfurt Bitcoin meetup, And I talked about sidechains, and unknown to me in the audience, there was Jonas Nick, who actually worked on the implementation of it. And so we had a really good discussion, and he said that all these functionaries are spread out throughout the entire globe, so they have diversified in that. And something else that he brought up to me that was really interesting that I did not know of is that this 11 out of 15 multisig is not just an 11 out of 15 multisig, but it has a second condition that after 2 weeks, a 2 out of 3 multisig is enough to transfer these Bitcoin. And these keys are owned, one is by Blockstream, and then the other 2 are for 2 separate lawyers who have a precise protocol on when and how to release these private keys and sign the multisig, but of course only after 2 weeks. So actually, you need a minimum of every 2 weeks, you need to have at least one on-chain transaction where these 11 out of 15 Federation members get together, so that this second clause in the smart contract is not triggered.
Whoa. This is really interesting. I did not realize that there's this second condition here. Like I knew I knew that they thought about the geographic distribution thing, but I had not heard about the 2 of 2, and then also it's a 2 of 3 with 2 lawyers in Blockstream, right? Like that is an interesting. I actually would like to see what this contract looks like on the Bitcoin blockchain now, because like. I guess, yeah, that should be able to be encoded as a smart contract on Bitcoin, though, because there's an op check sequence verified for the 2 weeks, and then there's just a simple 2 of 3 script after that, and then like they obviously have some legal stuff on the back end for the lawyers that they need. I'm sure they're under like legal contracts to execute this stuff, but very interesting. I met Jonas for the first time at Scaling Bitcoin in Tokyo, and he's a very nice guy, and like he's doing a lot of work right now on Schnorr signatures in SecP 256K1, the library. And I have a Bitcoin implementation in a programming language called Scala, which runs on the JVM. And I was asking him when I should start worrying about writing bindings for the Schnorr signature implementation in SecP. And he said, "Oh, we still got a little ways to go, but I think hopefully we can get Schnorr in 2019. People have been talking about it forever."
Oh yeah, Schnorr really is something, and that is one big issue with this really complex script that the Federation is running on. Right, it's 11 out of 15, so you actually need to have at least 11 signatures. Plus, you still need the additional 4 signatures of the entire 15, or at least the public keys.
And then you reveal the public keys every single time too.
Exactly, and you also have to have the second clause. So the transaction size is enormous.
Yeah.
And of course, with at least they're running on BEC32, so they have a lot of savings there. But SegWit, but they do not. So they do not have any key aggregation. So no ECDSA multiplication or no aggregated Schnorr, and no normalized abstract. Exactly, no Mast. It really is expensive, and they are working now even more to make sure that they actually have a that they have some way of making this cheap.
Well, like that's always great though when you see like companies like Blockstream like say like, hey, like we have this use case now, it's very inefficient, so let's figure out how to make it more efficient. And like Mast and Schnorr signatures are like great things for them to like use to make their resource usage of the blockchain much more efficient, because like that's something we need to really worry about going forward and growing, is like we want to try and not abuse this public utility we have, and like the Lightning Network is a great example of that. And then like technologies like Schnorr and Mast and Musig are also great things for Bitcoin and just cryptocurrency as a whole.
Oh yeah, exactly. So really curious. And what I find especially entertaining is to think of a world where we have both sidechains and the Lightning Network.
Yeah.
Because now you can very easily do a cross-chain Lightning atomic swap, so many buzzwords, but then you actually have a liquid market between these 2 chains. How is that going to play out?
Well, like, it's funny you asked that, because like a lot of like the sidechain research that I did, the hardest part about a sidechain is the two-way peg problem. And like the hardest part about the two-way peg problem is going from the sidechain back into Bitcoin under the worst case scenario. So imagine like the sidechains being attacked by a miner, or the cryptography broke on the sidechain, or some just catastrophic failure scenario along those lines. Like, how do you get the Bitcoin back out of that sidechain into Bitcoin, preserving the ownership property, where like the person that owns the sidechain coin get the Bitcoin back? And it's a very tough problem to solve, and I'm not going to claim that I solved it, but you need tools like the Lightning Network to make sure you have very liquid, efficient markets, such that a miner cannot hold sidechain coins hostage. You need the exchange rate to be not 50 cents on the dollar when you're redeeming sidechain tokens for Bitcoin, but closer to 99 cents on the dollar. I'm not saying that the miner can't make a reasonable profit, but anything more than a percentage point, I'd say, would probably be too much. And the Lightning Network, in my opinion, is one of the ways to hold those people, hold miners responsible in those scenarios. And again, like, go check out my Medium if you want to read more about that. But like, I think the Lightning Network is just like, really compelling in all these use cases, because like it just enables you to have much more liquid markets, faster markets, like allows you to kind of reflect what's happening in like, the here and now, rather than having to wait for 6 confirmations on the Bitcoin blockchain, which makes me super excited for my company's reasons, working at Surebits. Personal reasons, I'm super excited. It's just a net win, in my opinion.
Oh yeah, it really is. And I was especially skeptical about the statement that the liquid Bitcoin are Bitcoin, which I don't think they are, because they are 2 different assets with 2 different properties.
Yes.
Right? 1 liter of water that you have in the Sahara is a completely different good than 1 liter of water that you have next to a mountain spring. Right?
Yeah.
It's different scenarios. Same with the liquid Bitcoin. You have confidential transactions. You have confidential assets. You have block signing instead of mining. There are all these different attributes and trade-offs in the liquid Bitcoin that it is a different good. It is redeemable with the Federation two-way peg in a 1-to-1 ratio. But if there is a illiquid market in the pegging out, then this means that the swap market over the Lightning Network, which is at all times liquid and which does not which does not neither create nor destroy liquid Bitcoin, right? If you're trading 1 Bitcoin versus 1 liquid Bitcoin, not pegging in and out, but just trading Alice and Bob, then this does not require the peg out transaction.
Yeah.
And it has a different market price, as you said. And if we have the scenario where the swap price, right, for not the peg out, but the actual trading price is below 1-to-1, even it is at 50%. Well, I might argue that then the sidechain is rather broken.
Yep. Either it's very broken, or someone's got a hell of an opportunity to make some profit, right? I mean, and this is just the nature of markets, right? You can have a market maker come in and decide like, hey, like, what the hell? Like, I can make 50 cents for every liquid Bitcoin I could get my hand on, because I know I can redeem it. So that's like the efficient nature of markets, and like Lightning Network just facilitates and makes it much more easier to do this stuff. At least in theory, like, we need to build out tooling, but like, from what I can see, there's no fundamental limitations here, which is phenomenal. Hopefully, like, that applies to other blockchains as well. Like, people want to store, like, use Bitcoin as their store of value, but then maybe use, like, I don't know, Ethereum for smart contracts, or whatever that means.
We need these crypto kitties. We really do.
I know. I love crypto kitties. To not build as much of a straw man, maybe like Monero, because you want to do some like privacy stuff, or Zcash, or whatever. Like there is that's the nice thing about blockchains, and like it is an open market where people can experiment with different things. I wish they'd be a little bit more ethical with like advertising, the downsides of what their coins do, but like I guess with the good comes the bad.
Yeah, exactly. And that is what Bitcoin has truly innovated in. Freedom in money, anarchy in money. Do whatever you want, and unless you're not hurting anyone, just innovate.
Yep.
Right?
Yep. And make sure
And
you hold your Bitcoin. Don't put them on an exchange though if you want to do that.
oh yes,
Get one of those wallets you had there. It looked really nice.
the Cold Card wallet, really cool, from the same peers that made OpenDime. So really worth checking out, and looking forward to what's to come here from Rodolfo and the peers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. Cool. So, Chris, we've talked about quite a lot, actually. It started out with Lightning, started with APIs. We actually got a demo in, which is perfect. That looked amazing. And then somehow we ended up with sidechains. So, is there any other topic that we haven't yet discussed where you're
I mean, I don't think so. Like, we've pretty much covered all the bases, I think. Like, talking about all the interesting technology that's coming out. Like how, again, like I think one of the biggest things the Lightning Network needs to do right now is like figure out what the commercial use case is, and like that people can use Lightning Network for on a daily basis to make their lives better and make it worth running a Lightning Network node. Because people like you and me, we love this stuff, and we're going to do it just because it's our passion. But for the everyday person, we need to make sure we give them an incentive to use the Lightning Network too, and make it make interesting things for people to use in a Lightning Network. Lightning Koala came and did the chain code hacker residency thing, and he has had the most successful Lightning application so far, in my opinion, and it was a really brilliant one. Like he masterfully put together this kind of competitive energy, I guess humans have, of over like this canvas. Like, I don't know, it's hard to describe, but like he did it in a very good way, and like made people interested in it by competing with each other. And I think we need a couple more of those moments in Lightning to get people to realize the full potential.
Oh yes, absolutely, and it's quite interesting to see if the user experience of Lightning Network will be more approachable than Bitcoin itself. Do you think that now that we can kind of reinvent how Bitcoin works, where do you think the innovation and the true usability of the Lightning Network lies?
I mean, I think for developer tooling, like what we're working on at Surebits, and like just using Lightning for your otherwise normal application is going to be much better. And we saw that at the chain code hacker residency, where devs with not a lot of cryptocurrency experience came in and basically got started up with the Lightning Network in a matter of a day. And I think just for your mom and dad or whatever that's not interested in crypto at all, really, the Lightning Network can abstract away a lot of these like details of like fees and confirmations and things like that, and I'll just be a normal payment experience for them, which is also super exciting. Yeah.
Oh yeah, and just the instant aspect of it, right? You don't have to worry about the confirmations. You press the button, done.
Yeah. I mean, and then like, in terms of exchanges too, like I think we're going to see a lot more efficient markets between exchanges. Like there isn't going to be a huge spread between BitMEX and Bitfinex and Kraken, because like, once those exchanges get their Lightning infrastructure set up, like everyone's going to be able to take advantage of arbitrage opportunities fairly quickly. And like maybe they can even do that now with Liquid. I'm not exactly sure like how many exchanges are set up for that, but crypto markets are going to become really efficient in the future, in my opinion.
Yeah, probably so, and especially when you see crazy stuff like Surebits happening, where the efficiency is down to the second. So.
Yep. I mean, like I hope that's a good demo of like how fast this stuff can react. And like again, you can do refills, you can do refunds, you can do all this sorts of stuff that's awesome and allows you to really pay for what you want rather than having to purchase all this extra stuff that you're not really interested in, and just to get a little piece of data that you want.
Yes, absolutely. And again, we had a question of that in the chat of how fast can Lightning transactions be? And well, let's distract that a little bit and say how fast can payment channel transactions be? How fast can you sign? Right?
Yeah.
That's it. And signing is quite fast.
Yep. I mean, like, well, there of course is network latency in there too, but like again, we're talking about more traditional like how fast is a packet sent across the internet sort of stuff, rather than, oh, my block interval is 10 minutes and, maybe I didn't get included in the first block, blah, 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 blah. There's like there's the funny arguments of other blockchains are like, oh yeah, I have 1 second block intervals or whatever. It's like, the Lightning Network now just like kind of makes all those arguments irrelevant in my opinion, because you got low fees, it's fast, it's, atomic, so you don't have to worry about ending up in this weird indeterminate state, and that's great.
Oh yeah, exactly, and it's always funny to hear where these multi-coins and blockchains where they talk about their efficiency and their speed of the blockchain. When I mean, blockchains, like, they suck, right? They're actually really not. I mean, they're cool, right? The dispute resolution, perfect. They initiate the scarcity aspect, right? The double spend is solved, but other than that, you don't want to have a blockchain, really.
I think of like blockchains as like a tank driving down the road that's like extremely slow, very secure, very robust, but like you can't use a tank to maneuver through, on a racetrack or through alleyways or side streets. You need like a motorcycle to do that, and the Lightning Network, for making car analogies here, is more like a motorcycle rather than a tank. But it's like the motorcycle using the tank as security or cover, and like with the Lightning Network, you always have the blockchain that you can go to and resolve disputes, and that's great.
Yes, exactly. So cool. One little thing that I'm still curious, and we spoke about that earlier for a little bit, is that the LND client is working with macaroons. What exactly is that?
So a macaroon is kind of like a one-time password thing that you can put on your client or wherever your RPC client is, and then authenticate with the server. I am not as familiar with LND as I am with other clients, because like for our internal stuff at Surebits, we're using a client called Declare. We've done some work with C Lightning as well, but only a little bit of work with LND. So don't ask me too much harder questions than that, because I won't be able to answer them. I'm just trying to be upfront and honest here. But yeah, like that's something that Roast Beef came up with to also create some sort of authentication hierarchy too. Like, so you can have like the root macaroon, which allows you access to all functionality in LND. And then I believe there's also like child macaroons that you can like give access to certain subsystems in LND, like maybe generating invoices but not sending payments from LND, I think is maybe a classification of macaroons. So like, Roast Beef is brilliant, and he's done a lot of like interesting work on like segregating out like different permissions in LND, and macaroons are kind of the driver for that, from what I understand.
Okay. Well, yeah, there are 1,001 questions that we all still have, and it's tough. It really, I think, I think we should sue someone like Roast Beef, because he's causing a physical brain damage from all these workflows.
Well, and he speaks so damn fast. I think if we could just get him to speak a little bit slower, we might be okay.
Well, and usually I love the feature on YouTube, the 2x. I'm hard for no 2x, right? But for YouTube speed, I actually do like the 2x. But for Roast Beef, you have to do 0.5.
Yes, of course. And you're like still thinking, like, I listen to him give talks in person. I look down, because I know if I look at it, like try and watch him, I won't understand anything. Like, and then I also like, if you lose your train of thought for like half a second, it's done. You might as well fast forward to the end of the talk, because like you're just like lost, and you're not going to be able to catch back up to him.
Well, yeah, very true, very true. Well, Piers, it was a pleasure talking to Chris, of course, and to you in the chat. Again, we've talked about a lot, so you got your homework, and definitely one thing that is a absolute must is the Lightning Hack Days, and especially the chain code residency, where you can get some amazing presentations from Chris, who just showcased the demo and talked a bit more about this. Super interesting. Get educated about this. This really is a once in a lifetime opportunity.
Yeah, I mean, and if anyone wants to learn more about what we're working on at Surebits, you can follow us on Twitter at SURED bits, or go to surebits.com/API to check out what API offerings we have right now. And we know we're looking to grow that library of APIs in the future. Things coming soon.
Very, very cool. I'm really looking forward to it. And again, I need some use cases so I can tell people that Lightning Network is not vaporware and you can actually do some stuff.
Yeah.
So I very much appreciate the work from entrepreneurs and coders like you who get shit done and make sure that the software is actually running.
Yeah, I mean, I try to be put my money where my mouth is, or I put my code where my mouth is, and like I've written a lot of code over the years, and like Lightning Network, I can say is like one of the most compelling layer 2 solutions or just technologies that use Bitcoin in general. And I'm thankful for Taj and Joseph Poon for publishing the paper, and I think I'm glad we see like people like Christian Decker and Roast Beef working on Lightning Network too, and Rusty Russell, of course, and driving the development forward. And I think we're really growing as a community. And by 2019, 2020, Lightning Network is going to be what people are talking about rather than some ICO or maybe not even Bitcoin itself. The Lightning Network can really abstract away whatever blockchain you're on.
Oh yeah, oh that opens up another entire can of worms of how can how will the Lightning Network integrate with shitcoins? Because if you can instantly dump your shitcoins for Bitcoin over the Lightning Network for anything, right? It's tough.
Well, I mean, why would you want to own anything but Bitcoin then? You transfer out for whatever you need a shitcoin for 30 seconds or whatever, and then you go back to Bitcoin. Bitcoin's your store of value. You maybe do some transactions in another coin, but I want my money with the most secure, stable, best security track record coin out there that has very conservative governance that isn't going to change underneath my feet. And that's Bitcoin today. I can't think of another coin that fits that bill better.
Yeah, exactly. And especially when we start layering, right? When we start leveraging the base layer, then we need to be sure that it is secure. Because when we have a super secure base layer and we leverage that, then the top layers can actually increase in the overall function and structure. But if we have Ethereum where you cannot run a full node, right? Then nobody can really verify what's happening on the blockchain, and then you end up with a bunch of problems. And if you have a Dogecoin, which Dogecoin is perfect.
That's the best coin.
Yeah, absolutely.
How dare you?
But what about stuff like IOTA, right? If you have that and they roll their own crypto, it's no. Just no.
I mean, that's what blockchains. I think you want to be very conservative and build stuff on top of them rather than building things into the blockchain. And blockchains are only going to grow just in terms of disk space. It's Bitcoin's already 200 gigabytes or whatever it is these days. Think about if you're a blockchain that's growing much more rapidly, where are we at in another 10 years? It's not a great picture in terms of that growth story. Hopefully we can figure out something there too.
Yes, absolutely. Curious where this goes. Chris, I absolutely enjoyed our conversation, and really looking forward to what you have to build and what is coming next.
If you see any interesting conferences that you're going to attend, send them over. I'm trying to get out into the European crypto scene a little bit more. So let me know if you see anything interesting, especially around Lightning Network stuff, and maybe we can meet in person one day.
Oh, that would be fantastic. Well, for anything with Lightning, Berlin I think is a good place.
Yeah.
Because that's where FOMO is at, and it feels like where FOMO is, there are the meetups.
Yes, exactly. He does such a phenomenal job.
Yeah, it's insane. Yeah, really. Great job, Jeff. Chris, it really was a pleasure talking to you.
Yeah, it was nice talking to you too.
And keep up the good work. Peers in the chat, hang in there, and we're gonna see you on the next show. I think it's Saturday with Pierre Rochard on
that'll be
Rothbard, Use Everything, talking about the Lightning Network and Excel.
Yes, it's very, very cool. I actually want to integrate with Pierre's Lightning Network Excel integration in the future. We get these financial markets API is open sourced, and you can pipe them into Excel. A lot of people can do some very interesting like modeling and stuff. So ask Pierre about that. He's a friend of mine, so he'll be a fun conversation.
Oh yes, I'm very much looking forward to it. And yeah, the thing is, like, you will never run out of topics to talk about in Bitcoin. So
Yeah.
it's tough to prioritize.
Talk about the Bitcoin Cash fork. But maybe let's let that best unsaid. That's best unsaid.
Well, Thomas did a great show on the WCN about the fork as it happened. Let me read the title, because that was really fitting when I found it, when I saw that. 1 second. It's the Great Bcash Fork, Bitcoin ABC versus Satoshi's vision versus who cares.
That's great. I can just imagine his voice too. You do a very good impersonation.
Well, yeah, and I'm definitely part of the third group. I don't care.
I got my popcorn bucket. I'm just like, they asked for this, like, oh, we're gonna fork all the time, and this is what happened.
Well, but they have governance, isn't that good?
Yes, very, very much governance, much governance.
Okay, well, let's wrap this up, Chris. It was a pleasure.
Yep. I'll talk to you later.
Yeah, Pierce. See you on the next show. Bye-bye.
Yeah.